Hello and welcome. I'm Anand Naidu filling in for Riz Khan. Can the US strategy of clear, hold and build work in Afghanistan? Almost 1 week into joint Operation Moshtarak, fighting has reportedly slowed down. There are pockets of Taliban fighters offering resistance, but more challenging for international and Afghan forces are the improvised explosive devices the insurgents have planted in and around the town of Marjah. Commanders on the ground say Operation Moshtarak could take as long as 1 month. But the broad plan to clear, hold and build will take much longer. On today's show, we ask, can the Taliban really be defeated? And if so, what comes next? Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. You can send an SMS or email. And of course, we also welcome your phone calls on the show. Joining me now from Brussels is Afghanistan's former Interior Minister, Ali Jalali. Mr. Jalali was a military planner for the Afghan national resistance during the Soviet occupation. He's currently a distinguished professor at the National Defense University. And from Toronto, Kamran Bokhari is Director of Middle East and South Asia Analysis for the global intelligence firm Stratfor. He is currently working on the soon-to-be-published Voices of Jihad, New Writings on Radical Islam. Gentlemen, welcome to both of you. Mr. Jalali, let's start with this US plan, clear, hold and build strategy. It's a long-term nation-building strategy which calls for the defeat of the Taliban, the implementation of some development programs very quickly, and then the installation of some kind of civilian administration that'll be very workable and effective. In your view, is that a practical plan?
Well, this is a process. Actually, the success of this process is going to measured in not in military terms, but in public opinion. On the other hand, the test of this or the success of this strategy will be tested when the troops move from clearing to holding and to rebuilding, which is a longer process. There's no doubt that this military phase is going to end soon, maybe in a few weeks. However, the process of holding and building will take months to come, and it will take time for the people to believe in this process, and eventually the success will depend on whether the people are going to trust the government and will lure the ideological Taliban to the side of the government.
Kamran Bokhari, what's your take on Operation Moshtarak? Is it a practical, workable plan?
Well, there are a number of angles to it. First of all, no one was expecting Western forces not to recapture the town. It was a given, because what we know of the Taliban strategy, or their modus operandi, is that they decline combat in the face of a superior military force, and then they return to fight at a time and place of their choosing. They're a guerrilla force, so that's not something really significant. I mean, this was expected. The question is, what will happen next? I mean, there's obviously the clearing is in the process. Then there's the phase of the holding. How long will Western forces hold this, and will it be able to hold it in time for Afghan security forces, and Afghan local provincial administration to take over responsibility from Western forces, because we're operating with a very short window, of opportunity, given the Obama strategy, which is directly linked to the political calculus, the domestic political calculus, or the domestic political timetable in the United States.
But we do know that the Taliban is engaging the coalition forces, because there has been resistance, in some instances very stiff resistance to the offensive right now.
Of course, you can't expect the Taliban just to flee, because from their point of view, they can't be seen as running away from the battlefield. So they'll always leave behind a certain number of forces to show that they are, quote unquote, resisting. But overall, most of the Taliban forces had left the area and mined it before they left.
Mr. Jalali, Kamran Bokhari brings up an important point there, and that is engaging the Taliban forces. For all we know, they could have all have left. In fact, there are some reports that many of them have regrouped north of Helmand in Uruzgan. Is this merely displacing the problem?
Well, it depends what is the next strategy of Taliban. Are they going to start the operation somewhere else in order to stretch the NATO forces and to draw them another area? That's yet to be seen. However, what you see in Marjah, it's a rear guard battle, actually. Eventually, I think with the superiority of the NATO forces and the technology they use, well, there's no doubt that they will win militarily. They will clear the area. However, what happens after that, if the Taliban start other fronts in Helmand, and that will depend how the NATO forces will respond to this. You know, Marjah is one district, or Nadi Ali is only one district among 385 districts of Afghanistan. But this is a microcosm. If this strategy, if this operation, this process succeeds in Marjah, this can send a message to other parts, other areas, that eventually the NATO is determined to turn the tide of the battle and to seize the initiative from the Taliban.
So are you saying this is a test run here?
I think it is a test. At the same time, it's a microcosm. If NATO or Afghan forces want to fight or a counterinsurgency battle, this is the way to do it, to clear areas and then to rebuild it, and then to hold it and rebuild it. And this is going to be a long process, because if we talk about 18 months, in 18 months it is be over optimistic to believe that the Afghan security forces and governance institution will be strong enough to hold the areas and rebuild at the same time the areas that are threatened by insurgency. So it will take a longer time.
Okay, let's go to the phones right now. We have one of our viewers calling from Ireland. Roberto, go ahead.
Okay, my name is Roberto Alamazani. I just want to know, what is the need of this operation while both Afghan forces and the NATO forces are failing to win the heart of people in the combat zone? And also, I want to know what happened to the so-called negotiation. Why they didn't go for the negotiation that we had before, but they have chosen, to launch this massive attack to the Taliban.
Okay.
Why this?
All right, thank you, sir. Let me put that question to Kamran Bukhari.
Well, first of all, the purpose of this battle is to win the hearts and minds and to demonstrate that the Taliban momentum can be undermined. Now, will it be undermined is a different thing, but as far as the intent is to show that the Taliban are vulnerable within their own core turf in the south. As far as the negotiations are concerned, you never have either or. Negotiations take place behind the scenes. They continue even at the height of the battle. So both processes run parallel, and it makes sense because when you're negotiating, you have to have some leverage, and the leverage is on the battlefield, and this goes for both sides.
Mr. Bukhari, when we look at the dynamic of what is going on here, at the moment, the coalition feels that the Taliban is getting support from civilians in a place like Marjah. Is the ultimate aim then for the civilians to reject the Taliban?
Of course, but the question is that given the short window of opportunity, given the short timeline, the very limited commitment from the United States and its NATO allies to Afghanistan, a local elder, tribal elder in a given area is faced with a quandary. The question is, why should those locals side with a force that's not going to be there to protect them, say in a few years' time, and they know that the Taliban will be here and they'll have to deal with them for the long haul. So that's a big dilemma for the locals, and then it points to a quandary in the strategy that the United States and its NATO allies are pursuing.
Okay, on that very issue, we've just received an email here from Muhammad Zilam, and he writes, the true strength of the Taliban does not stem from any radical ideology or from economic conditions, but from the Afghan sense that they're being occupied by foreigners. This is a very strong motivation given the history there. Mr. Jalali?
Well, I disagree with that, because the Taliban is not a monolithic entity. Actually, it's the different groups, and it's odd assortments of different groups who are fighting for different reasons. Yes, there are, a group of ideologically motivated Taliban, who are fighting the Afghan government and the international forces that support the Afghan government. On the other hand, there are other groups who are fighting for different reasons. There are groups who are aggrieved, who are were mistreated either by the international forces or by the Afghans. And there are tribes who believe that they were excluded from power. There are criminal groups who are taking advantage of this unstable environment. So there are groups that actually Afghanistan faces an unstable environment where that unstable environment is being exploited by the different groups for different purposes.
You mentioned just a moment ago that you thought that this was a test run and that this strategy could be implemented in other parts of Afghanistan. Why do you think the coalition chose Marjah? Would not Kandahar have made more sense? That appears to be the stronger, or at least the stronghold for the Taliban.
Well, Kandahar is not occupied by or controlled by Taliban per se. However, Marjah for the past 2 years was controlled by Taliban. So this is it become a symbolic, a symbol of the resistance of Taliban in Helmand province, which is actually in the heart of the Taliban's control sphere. So therefore, Marjah is actually a symbol. It is, as I said, that if Marjah actually can be rebuilt, in Marjah the people or the government can win the trust of the people, that actually will send a message that yes, the time has changed. It is not driving in and driving out operations that was going on for the past several years.
Okay, we have lots more to talk about, but we are going to take a short break right now. More of our discussion in a moment. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're discussing Afghanistan and the joint Operation Moshtarak, which aims to clear Taliban forces out of the Marjah and surrounding area. It's part of America's clear, hold and build strategy for the country. But will it work? Here with me are Ali Jalali, former Interior Minister of Afghanistan, and Kamran Bokhari, Director for Middle East and South Asia Analysis at the global intelligence firm Stratfor. Kamran Bokhari, let me start with you this time round. A Washington newspaper described the current offensive not as a clear, hold and build strategy, but as a surge, bribe and run strategy. In essence, the newspaper says the Obama approach is straightforward. If you can't defeat them, buy them off. And of course, this is a similar kind of strategy that was used in Iraq when George Bush implemented a surge and then paid off Sunni chiefs.
Well, I mean, there may be some, element of truth to that. But the bottom line is, whatever you're doing, however you're trying to undermine the insurgency, the question is how much time is being spent. In Iraq, the Ba'athist state had an infrastructure that the Americans and their allies simply, used and grafted the new political arrangement upon. In Afghanistan, you don't have that. The country has been unfortunately ravaged by civil war for decades. So there is no system upon which you can just bring people in and get them to join the process, so to speak. And grafting creating a new system from scratch requires time. And from the words of the President Obama himself, there isn't that much time. So whatever it is, whether you're bribing, whether you're winning the hearts and minds, however you wish to describe it, it's a limited campaign, a limited effort, and limited in time. So if that's the case, the success either way is something that one can't be optimistic about.
Mr. Jalali, is Operation Moshtarak partly a surge, bribe and run strategy?
Well, I disagree with that. I think the Operation Mushtarak has a very clear strategy. That is to win the trust of the people. In the past 8 years, many mistakes was made. In fact, in this kind of operation, you have to take two sets of measures. One is to reduce the level of threat, and the other to build the capacity to respond to threat. And therefore, it's a complex measures. It is not as simple as to buy a surge and a bribe. actually it is it requires a comprehensive approach. Whatever you do should be integrated into an overall counterinsurgency strategy. In this kind of strategy, you cannot win militarily, but you can lose militarily. So therefore, military is one element, and then it should create a space, an environment, so that other measures will be taken in order to win eventually the support of the people. And that's when the victory will come, will begin to come.
Okay, another one of our viewers calling from Zurich, Switzerland. This is Bami. Go ahead with your question.
Hi there. What I was just going to ask is, if this war is based on a strategy to resolve something, I just believe that the fact that the NATO forces explain and bring out all their opinion based on what they want to do, they're coming up with, or they're going to attack a certain place. I just think it's basically explaining what their strategy is before they go in. And I just think that if that happens, obviously there's no one who's going to wait for them to say, okay, yes, you're coming. And then we have civilian casualties because the people who they're meant to go in to fight with know that they're coming down and they leave.
Right.
And NATO forces.
Okay. Good point. Let me put that to Kamran Bukhari. Caller there saying that the war strategy was well known even before the fighting started. So I suppose the element of surprise was lost.
That depends if the intention was to have an element of surprise. I think that Operation Moshtarak is more political than military. The idea was to telegraph to everybody, particularly the Afghan people, that the United States and NATO and the Afghan government are here to protect them, and they're making an effort, and a significant effort, in that direction. This was not about defeating insurgents or seizing territory. It's more of a political move, which links into the winning the hearts and minds campaign. So I don't think that there was a need to have an element of surprise. And I don't think anybody in the U.S. military or those of the NATO forces were expecting the Taliban to stay and fight. I mean, they knew that once they'll go in, they will leave and mine the place. So it's not about having an element of surprise.
Okay, we have London calling. Jamshid in London.
Hello.
Hi, go ahead with your question.
My question is that how can the Allied forces and Afghan forces win this battle when trained terrorists keep on coming from Pakistan? And now you know that Afghan forces, U.S. and Afghan forces are not fighting the Afghan Taliban, but Pakistanis and Arabs. Thank you.
Okay, let me ask Mr. Jalali to try and answer that one.
Well, no insurgency can be successful unless it has sanctuaries across the border, which is the fact in Afghanistan. Yes, there are sanctuary bases of insurgents across the border, but it does not mean that inside Afghanistan there are not insurgents. They are on both sides of the border. So therefore, I think, as I said before, you have to take a comprehensive approach. On the one hand, you have to reduce the level of threat, which means the cooperation with regional powers to go after these sanctuaries at the same time, to start a process of reconciliation, reintegration. This actually can reduce the level of threat. On the other hand, you have to have the capacity to provide services and protect population. And that means the Afghan government will need eventually to build its institutional capacity so that it will take over the responsibility. Eventually, this insurgency will not be defeated by NATO or by any other entity or the United States. It is going to be defeated by Afghans through the establishment of good governance, protection of population, the rule of law, in controlling its territory.
Okay, another caller. This is Yakubu.
Can I add to that, Ani?
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Just very quickly, I think that the notion of cross-border insurgency needs to be placed into context. I completely agree with Minister Jalali that there is support. There can't be as insurgency without sanctuaries in neighboring places. But at the same time, we need to keep this into context. Those who are fighting in places like Marjah, or the wider Helmand province, Uruzgan, Kandahar, and the places where the Taliban hold territory, they're not constantly running back and forth to Pakistan, though it does take place in much more frequency in the eastern parts of Afghanistan, which are linked to the tribal areas. So we need to keep into context and not exaggerate the element of cross-border or foreign element. No insurgency in any country can exist without a robust local and indigenous network.
Okay, let's go to Yakubu in Nigeria. Yakubu, we just have a minute left.
Can I add something to this?
Let's get this question in from Yakubu in Nigeria. Very quickly, Yakubu, what's your question?
Okay.
My question is that I want to ask those people in the studio that if Taliban can be defeated, they can change their fate. Their fate is more stronger. For me, I see in the Taliban, their fate is more stronger, more bigger and wider than the modern world sophisticated weapon of war. To me, they can be defeated through cutting some verses from the Holy Quran and some tradition of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Okay, thanks, Yakubu. We've run out of time. I'm going to give the last word to Mr. Jalili there. Go ahead, sir.
Well, just want to add something to Bukhari. I think, yes, there are Taliban inside Afghanistan who are fighting the government. But in Helmand, particularly in southern Afghanistan, actually the base is Quetta Shura in Balochistan, which unfortunately was not actually dealt with.
Okay, sir,
by
I'm afraid
Pakistan.
I'm going to have to...
Actually, in the past year.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to interrupt you there. We've run out of time. Thank you for being with us. Thanks to Mr. Bukhari and Mr. Jalali for joining us. And thank you for watching. Remember, you can follow the show on Facebook, where you'll find upcoming topics as well as previous programs. Be sure to post your questions and comments there as well. On the next show, US-China ties, with the two nations sparring over Taiwan, the Dalai Lama and internet freedom. We look at the future of this uneasy relationship. Make sure to tune in for that. We'll see you the next time.